Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a subject that generates, well, a lot of heat, a lot of discussion, but often may be missing a key piece. We're going to unpack a really intriguing article by Nnanda Kizito Sseruwagi. It sheds light on the debates around homosexuality of Uganda. And our challenge today, can science really cut through maybe centuries of bias, deeply held beliefs, to give us a clearer picture?
That's exactly the author's point, really. Their core argument is that these big public discussions everywhere, from schools to workplaces,
Yeah.
they're just so heavily swayed by cultural biases, religious ideas, and frankly kind of shallow legal or public health takes.
Hmm.
And they often miss, sometimes completely miss, an informed scientific angle.
Right. So, our mission for this deep dive, then, is to explore the scientific insights presented in this source. See how they challenge some common arguments that maybe aren't so scientific after all. Like, what does it really mean when we talk about what's natural? Or, whether something's a choice. Let's dive in. Okay, so one of the big ones the article points to, maybe the closest some voices get to a scientific claim, is this idea that homosexuality is against the order of nature, unnatural. But the author comes at this quite differently, right? Redefining natural itself.
Exactly. What's fascinating, I think, is how the author confronts this head-on. They explain that nature itself doesn't really have a purpose.
No grand design.
No intentional design, no specific goal. Instead, you've got these natural processes just operating through random genetic variations, mutations, environmental pressures.
Yeah.
It's all driven by evolution and natural selection.
And the article gives some really vivid examples of this kind of purposeless nature. It talks about errors and imperfections, right?
Precisely. Yeah, the author points to countless examples. I mean, think about conditions like being born lame or blind, or just the huge variations in people, height, skin color, all that. Products of random genetic stuff.
It doesn't stop there, though. The source brings up like a whole list of vestigial organs, parts of us that don't really do their original job anymore.
Right? Like the appendix or wisdom teeth. I mean, if nature was all about perfect, purposeful design, why have an appendix that just gets infected?
Or wisdom teeth that don't fit.
Exactly. Or, and this one's always surprising, male nipples. Men don't breastfeed, so
Yeah.
no function there.
Yeah.
Even body hair doesn't really keep us warm like it does for other mammals.
The author even mentions the human eye, which you'd think is perfect, but apparently has its own flaws.
Yeah, calls it another example of a, quote, dysfunctional and poorly designed feature. It really challenges that perfection idea.
So, okay, bringing it back. What does all this mean for the argument that homosexuality is unnatural if nature isn't perfect or purposeful?
Well, it means, according to the author, that you simply can't claim nature has some deliberate intention in how it works. So that whole basis for saying certain orientations are unnatural, it kind of crumbles, doesn't it? It reframes the whole debate.
Okay, that makes sense. It shifts the perspective entirely. Now let's turn to another really common idea the source addresses. This notion that homosexuality is a lifestyle choice. Sometimes even suggesting, that young people are being paid to adopt it.
Yeah, the author refutes that pretty directly.
Yeah.
And they use the natural world beyond humans to make the point. Quite compelling, actually. They point out that over 1,500 animal species have been observed engaging in homosexual behavior.
Wow, 1,500.
Yeah. So if it were just a choice or something you get paid for, you have to wonder who's paying all those penguins or dolphins, right?
That certainly puts into perspective. It really does flip the script on that choice idea. So, okay, if it's clearly not a lifestyle choice, according to this source, what is the science saying about where sexual orientation comes from in humans?
This is where the biology comes in. The article explains that sexual orientation has a biological basis. It's rooted in biochemical reactions in the body, specifically hormones. It argues it's actually natural for individuals to experience sexual attraction in specific ways determined by these biological processes.
Hormones.
Yeah.
Okay, we know they're powerful, but how exactly does the article connect something as complex as sexual attraction to hormones? Is it really just a biochemical thing?
Well, it's described as quite intricate. The article explains that hormones play a huge role in brain development, especially organizing the fetus's neural circuits while it's forming in the womb.
In the womb, so before birth.
Exactly. During pregnancy, both the mother's body, via the placenta, and the fetus itself produce sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen.
Yeah.
And the fetus's brain development is shaped by its exposure level to these hormones.
Okay, so how does that shaping lead to different sexual orientations then? Walk us through that a bit.
Certainly. So, for heterosexual orientation, the typical scenario described is a male fetus being exposed to higher levels of testosterone. This tends to incline the brain development towards masculinity and attraction to females. Conversely, a female fetus usually gets lower testosterone exposure, leading towards femininity and attraction to males.
But variations can happen.
That's the key point. Variations in those hormone levels during that critical prenatal period. For instance, a female fetus exposed to higher than usual testosterone, or a male fetus with lower than typical levels, that can predispose them towards same-sex attraction.
Predisposition, interesting word. And how does this explanation account for bisexuality? Does it fit the model?
Yes, the author uses a similar logic. They describe bisexuality as resulting from a kind of delicate balance.
Mhm.
So for a male fetus, if the testosterone levels aren't high enough to lead to exclusive attraction to females, but also not low enough to lead to exclusive attraction to males, they might be predisposed to bisexuality.
Yeah.
And similarly, for a female fetus, if the testosterone isn't quite high enough for lesbian orientation, but not low enough for clearly heterosexual orientation, they might develop attraction to both men and women. This whole process, the article argues, really highlights that sexual orientation isn't about lifestyle choices made later in life.
Wow. It's quite something to think that something so fundamental to who a person is, their identity, is shaped by these complex biological interactions before they're even born. It really does underscore the article's main message, doesn't it? That this isn't about choosing a lifestyle.
Precisely. It frames it as being about complex prenatal biological shaping, a biological basis for attraction.
This deep dive has really given us a powerful reminder, I think, of how much deeper our understanding can go when we move past assumptions and biases. We've explored how the very idea of nature is maybe more complex than we often assume, and how sexual orientation seems rooted in biological processes, hormones, during fetal development. It's about replacing assumption with, well, with understanding.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the author argues that without developing some curiosity for this science, it's a bit complex maybe, but still understandable, society is likely to remain plagued by what they call chauvinistic homophobia, which does raise an important question for all of us, really.
So when you consider these scientific insights, maybe stepping back from ingrained cultural ideas, what new perspectives might open up for you? How might embracing a scientific lens change the way you approach discussions about complex social issues? Something to think about.